Hi and welcome to week 7, Twinkle Twinkle. Now this video is going to be slightly different. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to make each section of these blocks. The way that's written in the instructions is the very simple, straightforward way. I'm going to show you a way that, if you've got enough fabric, is a bit speedier if you're feeling lazy like I do. The way that this one is written, for the star leg blocks, we have enclosed a foundation paper piecing pattern to allow you to do them on the paper. That gives you true accuracy to ensure that you've definitely got your points in the right place, but there is another way of doing it. So we're going to have a look at that as well. So the traditional way in this block, as written in the instructions, is that you will need 10 squares of fabric A cut at 1 7/8 inch. You will need 10 squares of fabric E cut at 1 7/8 of an inch. You will need 4 3-inch by 3-inch squares of fabric F and 8 rectangles of fabric H, which are 2-inch by 3.5 inch. Now, we're going to start by making our 4 patch. So we're going to look at the traditional way first. So for this, we're obviously just going to lay them out as they should be. We put them right sides together, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam for both pieces. Now I've chain pieced these blocks, so you get a little thread in the middle of them. That's actually quite good. It acts a little bit like a pin. We're going to make sure that one is pressed to the left and the bottom one is pressed to the right. Now usually you say press to the dark side, but on these two I couldn't decide whether the green or the red was the dark, so I'm pressing to the red. You then just fold those two together and nest those seams. So you want that little centre seam to line up, so you've got one going one way, one going the other. That tiny thread actually will help to hold it in place, but if you're not feeling too confident with that, you can always stick a trusty wonder clip on the middle. And then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down the middle. There we go. Joined together, press your block back, rotate your seams around the centre to reduce bulk, and we need to make 5 of those. That's one way. The alternative would be, rather than cutting your 1 7/8 pieces into the squares, you leave them as strips. You put the 2 strips together and you sew them with a 1/4 inch seam. I've actually done one already. So here it is. I've pressed that seam towards the red, again because I'm choosing red to be my darker. And then using your ruler, usually I'd recommend cutting off the first bit on the beginning because it tends to be a little skew. Make sure you've got a squared edge. And then cut your 1 7/8 pieces. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, just checking. Okay. You then just need to rotate them and sew them together down the middle, and you'll see that your seams have already nested, and that will make our 4 patch. Press them back as we did before, and they're just like the one that we made before, but actually these can come out a little bit squarer. You still need to have 5 of them, so whichever method you choose to make them with, that's the way to do it. So there we have 5 lovely little 4 patches, which we're going to put to one side until we're ready to assemble our block. Now for the next block, we've been given our foundation paper, and we know that the technique for this now is very straightforward. We're going to flip this over. We're going to take one of our fabric F 3-inch squares, tiny bit of prip, put that on and it will cover the whole block. This is the easiest foundation piecing in the world ever. Turn it over, use your pin to mark where you want to line your rectangles up. Take your rectangle of fabric H and put it the opposite side of the pins, overlapping by about 1/4 of an inch. If you're worried about it moving, pop a pin in it, and then we're going to take it to the machine and sew along the line between A1 and A2. Back at the cutting mat, we've sewn our line, fold back the paper, and then we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch roughly from our fold. Fold that back, turn it over, take out the pin, fold it back. Where's that seam roller? Give it a little press. Repeat for the other side. So pins go in to give you an idea of where to put it. Turn it over. Fabric on the right side of the pins. Make sure that it's going to reach down. Bear in mind some of this will go into your seam allowance. Stick a pin in to hold it in place. Turn it over. We're going to take it and sew between A1 and A3. Back at the mat. As we've said before, make sure you're using that small stitch, that 1.5 or whatever it is on your machine. Fold back the paper. Ruler on. Around about 1/4 of an inch. Cut off the excess. There's not a great deal of waste on this one. Fold the paper back. Turn it over. Take out that pin. Fold back your rectangle. Give it a quick press, then turn it over, and all we've got to do is trim round the block, leaving the seam allowance in place. Get rid of our offcuts, and that is one of our star legs, made and ready. The moment, keep your papers on. That gives you a nice crisp pointed legs, so it helps if you're quite new to that or you're not confident with where your points should go. But there is a freehand method. So for this, all you're going to need is to take your 3-inch square, fold it in half and finger press at the top so you can see where the centre line is. Take your fabric H. Now this is going to have to flip and flip back, so it needs to overlap, but it also needs to line up with where that centre point is and the bottom corner of your block. Now you're going to have to make sure that you are able to sew from that centre point right to that corner. You might find it easier to make a mark on your fabric just so you've got something to follow. She says making a mark with a pencil that doesn't show up. I think it's time I actually sharpened my pencils. There we go. Okay, take that to the machine and stitch along the line that you've drawn. So this is working almost like a flying geese block. Fold it back to make sure that you've got enough fabric to cover where the 3 inches would be. As long as that meets, 1/4 inch from where you've sewn your line, trim off that excess. Press that back. and grab your other piece. This time we want it to coordinate with that corner again, but also to overlap at the top. It always feels a little bit like a guessing game. Move that up slightly. Again, if you're worried, you can draw a line that you can follow that will meet up with that bottom corner. Just pull that across a little bit. See if this pencil line shows up this time. Yeah. Now you'll notice I'm doing something wrong here. Turn it around. That fabric needs to be on the inside so that when it comes back, it folds back against it. Let's make sure we do it right. Line it up in that bottom corner. You've got your line. Take that to the machine. And again, just like with the foundation piece, and if you're worried you're going to lose it, put a pin in it, sew along that line you've drawn. Line sewn, make sure there's enough to cover back. Trim off that excess at a 1/4 inch. Press that back. And then all we need to do is square our block to 3 inches. I'm going to line that in the corner. Turn it around. 3 inches, and there we have star legs. Just like our ones that we've made with the foundation paper, but it doesn't have the paper obviously on the background. My worry when doing it this way is that the legs can end up looking different on each one. With your foundation paper piecing, they'll all look the same, so you get that uniformity. That appeals to my OCD. This way will give you the same pattern, but you can end up with more of a wonky star. So it depends on the look that you're going for, which method you choose to use. Either way, you need to have 4 sets of star legs. So here we have our 4 star legs and our 5 4 patches. I'm going to lay out the block as I want to assemble it. So on this block, the 4 patches are in the corners. Just check the orientation of your fabric A and fabric E. I keep turning them round. There we go. And then our star legs are going to go in between them all the way round. If you foundation piece them, keep your papers on for the moment. And that's going to make our star. So we're going to assemble them in rows and then join the rows together. So to do that, quite straightforward. Put them right sides together, and because we've got our foundation papers here, it shows us exactly where our 1/4 inch seam will be. Off camera, there we go. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to sew along there. There's my sewn line between the A3 and on the seam allowance. That will now open out. Take the other 4 patch, put it right sides together, keep an eye on the orientation of those blocks, and we're going to sew again along the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that is my top section all assembled. On this one, the seams are pointing out to the edges. We're now going to assemble the middle section. Keep an eye on the orientation of those star legs. Right sides together, sew along the seam allowance line. So that's the 2 star legs added. This time the seams are folding into the centre. I'm going to go ahead and assemble the bottom piece the same as we did the top, and then we'll just be putting them right sides together and sewing a 1/4 inch seam. Back in a moment. So that's all our sections, our rows joined together. So bringing these together, we're going to nest those seams. I would recommend putting a wonder clip where you've nested your seam, just to help it when you're up at the machine, because it does sometimes have a little wiggle. Clip that in place, and we're then going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way along that centre line. So there we are, we've sewn all the way along there, along the centre line. Fold that back, and that's the top half of our block together. Take your bottom section, fold it up so that it's right sides together. We're going to put those wonder clips where the seams nest. This is the one that I did without the foundation paper. One clip there, one clip there where it nests, and if it helps you, if you turn it over, you've got more paper to guide you, and we're going for that 1/4 inch seam again. So there we go, and then there is our block. You can now take the foundation paper out of the back and give it a good press. Easy. 2 different ways to do it, both equally as effective. As I say, it's all about getting that accuracy. I like the foundation paper for that. Remember, your legs might look legs might look slightly short at the moment, but that's because there is a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around this block. That will disappear once it goes into the final quilt. That one that we did without the paper, that's this one, and you can see what I mean, how even though it looked like it was exactly the same, it can end up coming slightly shorter, so you don't get quite the same level of accuracy with that. But there is our Twinkle Twinkle block. I look forward to seeing yours online. Bye bye.